Okay, hello guys. Our application actually is going to have a lot of moving parts, and the fact that we actually have a big problem putting identity server into a Docker container shouldn't be stopping us. Actually, we will attack from another angle. And what we have to do is actually continue with the rest of the moving parts. There are a lot of gears. We concentrated our effort in only one gear, identity server, STS security token server, which easily can be replaced with anything third party which speaks out 2.0 and OpenID Connect, which means that even though we cannot run identity server in our own Docker container, we still can put it somewhere under a given domain, and this identity server can serve us as a STS security token server. It doesn't necessarily should be into a container. Nobody says the microservice architecture actually should be used with containers. They're just perfect match. That's it. We insisted in this direction, but right now, let's look at the rest of the moving parts. We know the APIs, we know the MVC applications. I'm talking about the .NET Core MVC, .NET Core Razor Pages, .NET Core API applications. We know how to do that. Now, we repeated this several times, so I hope that we know it. We know Entity Framework, how to work with databases. So we are familiar with program file, with startup file, with configure, and everything. So now let's work on something else. Let's move, as I said, and attack the problem from another angle. And this is RabbitMQ. RabbitMQ is an implementation of advanced message queue protocol. Let's read a little bit and familiarize ourselves with the RabbitMQ because our microservices should communicate between each other, for example, to synchronize the databases, but this shouldn't be done through HTTP from the front end. So we don't expose this communication as a services, and they shouldn't communicate through HTTP probably. They should communicate with another messaging protocol. So let's read a little bit about the RabbitMQ and let's make three tutorials. I will separate them in three different movies. So let's go and see. RabbitMQ is the most widely deployed open source message broker. With tens of thousands of users, RabbitMQ is one of the most popular open source message broker from T-Mobile, Runatastic, blah 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 blah. So this is the testimonial. Obviously, RabbitMQ is lightweight and easy to deploy on premises and in the cloud. It supports, okay, so that I don't think we should read that actually. Features, get started. We just jump into the get started. If I click here, download RabbitMQ, and if you go to download and install, you will see that we can have it in Docker container. And this is the way I prefer to have it. I don't want to install on my machine 10,000 things. I just want to have Docker containers, everything into Docker containers, so I easily can change my development stack. This is actually the very same page. But when we start reading, actually we got to the first tutorial, which is Hello World. As far as I remember, it's a Hello World from RabbitMQ. And here probably we will understand a little bit more. Pre-requests. This tutorial assumes RabbitMQ is installed and running on localhost, blah blah. So let's do that first. Let's go here. I'm not even gonna read anything else. I'm gonna run it as a Docker container. Let me open my terminal. So Docker ps, yeah, nothing is running. Docker ps minus minus all. This is the way actually we should build applications in the future with Docker containers. At least this is what I believe. And we are working right now with distributed, cloud native, serverless, service-oriented architecture, which means that your application is not located in one server, it's spread across the entire internet. You just put together different APIs and services. So now let me paste this and we'll run Rabbit. This actually, I'm going to lose this terminal because once it runs, it doesn't have the option -d, which says, okay, run it as a daemon right now. So it's going to occupy this PowerShell. Okay, the messages from RabbitMQ. It's running on port 5672. Okay, that's easy to see here from the running command. Docker run -it interactive. Remove, that means when it stopped, remove it. -- name, so don't give me a random name like here. Just give me the name RabbitMQ minus port, so export the port 5672, which is internal 5672, and export also and expose actually 1567 to map it to 15672. RabbitMQ is the image. Okay, it's running right now. We will check this throughout the tutorial. Okay, so let's read a little bit, because this is the hello world tutorial from Rabbit. At least this is what I believe. Yeah. So introduction. RabbitMQ is a message broker. It accepts and forwards messages like a post office. You can think about it as a post office. When you put the mail that you want posting in the post box, you can be sure that Mr. or Mrs. mail person will eventually deliver the mail to your recipient. In this analogy, RabbitMQ is a post box, a post office, and a postman at the same time. So that's everything. So I just wanna have a feedback, so I'm gonna ask George, is that clear? Probably yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
everything is clear.
The major difference between RabbitMQ and the post office is that it doesn't deal with papers. That's the only difference. Actually, we always copy this dimension. In our engineering practice, we copy everything from the real world. That's it. In the object-oriented programming, we do the same. Instead, it accepts, stores, and forwards binary blobs. That's um, big binary object. This is what blob means, of data messages. RabbitMQ and messaging in general uses some jargon. Producing means nothing more than sending. A program that sends messages is a producer. It's represented with this ellipse with P inside. So the producer is the program which sends the message. We have to familiarize with ourselves with the terminology in this gear, in this realm, because it's one of our moving parts as identity server, as um, API gateway, which is going to be Ocelot. We are going to look at this very shortly. Q is the name for a post box which lives inside RabbitQ. This is very important analogy. This is a post box. Post box. It's not the post station actually, it's a post box. Although messages flow through RabbitMQ and your applications, they can only be stored inside a queue. So you have to put the message into a post box. A queue is only bound by the host's memory and disk limits. It's essentially a large message buffer. Many producers can send messages that go to one queue, and many consumers can try to receive data from one queue. This is how we represent a queue, with these squares, actually, not squares, but rectangles. Queue name. And consuming has a similar meaning to receiving. A consumer is a program that mostly waits to receive messages. Let me make sure that I'm recording right now. Okay. So again, represented with C, consumer. So producer, queue, and consumer. Pretty simple idea. Note that the producer, consumer, and broker do not have to reside on the same host, which is a good thing. Indeed, in most applications, they don't. An application can be both a producer and consumer too. It's a very interesting way for the processes to communicate to each other. Hello world, this is what we're gonna do, and I have chosen ASP.NET, of course. See how many clients do they have: Python, Java, Ruby, PHP. So all these different programs, actually programming languages and technologies, can be used for the same purpose, and nothing prevents us actually Python application to communicate with C# or vice versa, or PHP, anything. So those are the libraries, those are the technologies for which these guys have libraries which you easily install and use. In this part of the tutorial, we will write two programs in C#, a producer that sends a single message and a consumer that receives messages and prints them out. We have to grasp the ideas. This is the most important thing. And after that, we will let our imagination fly and we will see how this is going to fit in our case. We don't have to follow somebody example and tutorial. We have to create our own creature. It could look like a Frankenstein, but doesn't matter as far as it does what's supposed to do. We will gloss over some of the detail in the .NET Client API. So they offer a .NET Client API, which is installable through NuGet Package Manager, as you can conclude already. Concentrating in this very simple thing, just to get started. It's a hello world messaging. We saw already that we can run the server side, in a Docker container. And RabbitMQ is running already on my local host on port 5672. Like the ordinary database, let's say, database server. So in the diagram below, P is our producer, C is our consumer. The box in the middle is the queue, a message buffer that RabbitMQ keeps on behalf of the consumer. That's a little bit strange. A message buffer, which is a queue, RabbitMQ on behalf of the consumer. Okay, so the .NET Client library, RabbitMQ speaks multiple protocols. This tutorial uses Advanced Message Queue Protocol 0.9-1. Probably there are protocols with different versions. If we need, we will go there and read the specification, which is an open general purpose protocol for messaging. There are a number of clients for RabbitMQ in many different languages. Well, we will use .NET Client Provider by RabbitMQ. The client supports .NET Core as well as .NET Framework 4.5.1, but in 10 days, if you remember, George, I have sent you the introduction video for .NET 5 actually, which is gonna unite all of them. One ring to unite all of them, so it's gonna unite the Xamarin, the .NET Framework, and .NET Core, and all these three frameworks are going to be called .NET 5. And this is going to happen during the conference, the .NET conference, which is going to be held online from 10 to 12 November. So I'm taking the opportunity to say that. This tutorial will use RabbitMQ, Client 5, and .NET Core, so you will ensure that installed in your path. Okay, I have .NET, of course, installed. You can also use .NET, and since I'm running the Rabbit into a container, I'm gonna log in into the container. I'm gonna attach myself. Attach is a different thing, but I'm gonna log into the container on another terminal, and I'm gonna issue the Rabbit commands if necessary. Okay, you can also use the .NET framework to complete this tutorial. However, the steps will be different. RabbitMQ Client 5 and later versions are distributed via NuGet, as we can guess already. This tutorial assumes you're using PowerShell on Windows and Mac and Linux nearly as shell will work. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so .NET Help, I don't even have to run that, but just for the sake of the consistency, let's run it. Or .NET Help, that's it. It's running .NET. Okay, we know that. Now, should produce a help message. Now let's generate two projects. Of course, we can do this with Visual Studio. I prefer to do it on the console, just to follow the steps here, and do it with Visual Studio Code, not with Visual Studio Prime. Okay, so let's go to our folder, which is called trash, change directory trash, as far as I remember.
To be honest, when you're so like
I cannot
I'm.
hear you very well right now. Can you speak
Can you hear me
louder?
now? Can you
Yes.
hear me now?
Yeah, now it's
Yeah. So
better.
when I was working too much on Visual Studio, now when I switch my laptop to Ubuntu and I am running Visual Studio Code, is a bit hard. So yeah, you're right. If you run the things on Visual Studio Code, then you're gonna be more confident to do it on Visual Studio. You
Yeah,
can do it wherever you want after.
yeah, exactly. I like to work on Linux, Raspberry Pi. orange pie, banana pie, whatever. So that's why I just keep doing the same thing. I prefer using Visual Studio Prime on the Windows machines, but when I move somewhere else, it's much more difficult, so I prefer to do it. And as you can see, with .NET, not with .NET, but follow me now. When you do the things with Visual Studio Prime, everything is visual. You cannot write a simple line of code to explain and express yourself, to explain the idea. You always have to take a screenshots because it's clicking of buttons. So the same explanation, if it's done with Visual Studio Prime, will take much longer, and it's absolutely necessary, essential to have a tutorial or pictures. So it cannot be automated. It's very difficult to be automated. But if you know shell, for example, well enough, all these commands could be automated with a single command. Actually, you can do whatever. Right now, I'm gonna do step by step. So this is the big advantage, and this is what I love about Visual Studio Code and the console. Visual Studio Prime is visual, but you cannot automate. Actually, there is a way to automate it, but it's much more difficult. It's not universal. Console is universal on all platforms, and I wanna keep this. I wanna be universal. And I wanna be working on all platforms. So, uh, since we are gonna create two different applications, I'm gonna put them in a single folder. So let me make directory, which I'm gonna call Rabbit um, Rabbit message queue hello world. What about that? It sounds okay to me. Actually, let me check something. Do you know? I just want to be consistent. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is exactly what I'm gonna do. So I'm creating in my trash folder Rabbit message queue hello world. Now I'm gonna switch to this folder, change my directory to this folder, and now I'm gonna run the commands in order to create the application. So those are standard. We know that minus minus name means um, use this name for the application, use this namespace. And it's a simple console application, as simple as it could be. And I love the console applications because you see very clear what is going on. This is actually the right way to do it, and this is how I like the documentation to be, to explain everything in the simple, totally stripped, bare bone way. Not just give me too much detail so I cannot understand actually what is going on. And after that, I can add complexity. But when you start explaining a very complex things since the beginning, it's absolutely impossible to grasp the ideas. Okay, so now we have a sent application. What they're actually gonna do now is gonna change the file which is created by the template program CS file, which actually contains the main uh, with the file which is called send CS. You could do that, probably not. It's up to you. It's nothing special. Okay, so now I'm gonna create the second application, which is the receiver of the messages. .NET new console minus minus name receive. So this is a console application which is gonna receive the messages sent by the producer, which first go to the RabbitMQ server, and after that RabbitMQ pushes the message to our receiver. And here we have the same situation, changing the name of the program to receive. Okay, now this will create two new directories, then we will add the client dependencies. Now change directories sent, and now we are installing the NuGet package manager. Okay, in both of them we need the message queue libraries, which are necessary for .NET to communicate. Okay, .NET add package rabbit message queue. See how slim actually is the explanation here when you don't use Visual Studio Prime, but you do it on the console. It's absolutely understandable, clear. So that's why I love to go back and forth between the Prime and the Visual Studio Code. George, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I have a little question.
Yeah.
When you're doing that console applications right now, and you have that Rabbit message queue on Docker container running, so you can actually run all the Rabbit commands without even installing it, and is that the way? Uh,
No, I have to install the libraries which my application is gonna use. Both of the applications are gonna use. So
but you
RabbitMQ is a
oh,
server, like a
that's true.
database server, but you still need a libraries which you install into your application in order to communicate with this server, to speak the same language.
Okay, I got it. Yeah,
You get it? Now
yeah,
you now the situation looks like that. You have the Rabbit message queue server which is running here, Rabbit message queue. We will have one application and another application, but they still cannot talk Rabbit language. So in order to do that, you need to install this Rabbit message queue client. So
yeah.
the
Is that the
client can,
NuGet packages you install at the minute?
pardon me?
Is that the NuGet packages?
Exactly. Those are the
Okay.
NuGet packages. So when I start typing, for example, Rabbit, I will have it. Otherwise, there are no classes. I cannot create objects which are necessary to communicate. Otherwise, I have to write everything from scratch.
Yeah, so basically they're gonna speak same language and you can communicate with the Docker container.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter it runs in a Docker container right now. It could be running on my machine bare metal, let's call it this way. Not bare metal, but directly on the operating system. It doesn't matter. Right now, it just runs, it happens to run into a container, but this doesn't complicate the things. I could have installed this directly on my machine, and when I start it, it's gonna listen on the same port, 5672. That's it, like exactly like the database. For example, MySQL, which listen on 3306, and my application, in order to communicate with the database, needs actually to install a library.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you cannot communicate with the database. You need to install something. Is that clear
yeah,
now?
yeah, it's clear.
Okay. So .NET Restore, I don't know why they're doing that. In any case, I'm gonna do it. Now we are switching to receive application, and I'm gonna do the very same. Install again RabbitMQ client. Client, in fact, is the library which allows our application to communicate with the RabbitMQ server. That's all. And .NET Restore, .NET Restore. Okay. So now we have the .NET project set up. We can write some code. And in order to write the code, actually, what I'm gonna use is Visual Studio Code. So I'm gonna say code dot. Of course, as I said, I can run it in Visual Studio. We know the commands which will add these two projects to a solution. We need a solution file and add to this solution file these two projects. In order to do that, we saw how this is done when we did the tutorials for Identity Server. If we want, we will run .NET solution, new solution, is going to create a file, and after that add to the solution. Those are the commands from the .NET. Required assets, of course I want. Azer, okay, because there are two different projects, he's asked me which one to start. Of course, I'm gonna take the responsibility to start it myself. I'm gonna start them manually. I need Visual Studio Code just to write the code, nothing else. So look at this. Instead of Program CS, which is the standard name of the application, now I rename it to receive and this one to send. That's it. So probably they will start with, they are identical right now, just the namespaces are different. So let's see now. Sending. How we are gonna send? Let's copy and paste the code right now. We'll call our message publisher sender send CS. This is a simple console application, so everything will be absolutely clear. And our message consumer receiver is the receiver CS. Is that clear? Yes.
Yep, very
Two
clear.
different applications, console applications. The publisher will connect to RabbitMQ, send a single message, then exit. That's it. Just sends the message and exits. In SenseCS, we need to use some namespaces. I'm not gonna even add the namespaces. I'm gonna do control dot when I write the code, when I have the code. Or do you know what? Let me do it. Okay. So system is clear. We need this namespace. RabbitMQ. This is what you are allowed to use when you install the new NuGet package managers. Oops, this is the receiver. So sorry about that. Send. We are working on the sender right now. So if I don't install the NuGet package manager, I'm not allowed to write this. Right? You understand that?
Yeah.
After you install the NuGet package manager, you can type here RabbitMQ client.
You can use that library.
Yeah, because you need this library, otherwise it's not possible to do anything. So let's see now how it works. We have the method main with the console hello world, so I'm not gonna even run that. It's clear what it's gonna do. It's gonna type hello world and exit. Then we can create a connection to the server. Now we need a connection the same way we need a connection to MySQL, to MS SQL Server, Postgre, whatever. So this is what we are gonna do now. I'm gonna comment just for fun, hello world. It always reminds me that this is a very simple hello world application. And how did I start? And look, it says var factory. They don't even bother to put the right type here because they use inference. They immediately set the factory, this variable, to an object from connection factory, and this connection factory probably comes from RabbitMQ client, and you set this property host name localhost. I don't know why they didn't do it in the constructor, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so that's all you need actually to get the connection. Now notice this using, we always said that the not the Visual Studio, but the C# is block scoped. This is what it means. So now, as you can see, with using, we are starting a new block, which means that once we stop our program, all the resources from the operating system which will be occupied by this connection will be released. So in this case, you don't have to close the connection, because each time when you ask for resources, the operating system opens, for example, a file or connection, and somebody needs to close this connection. Very often the developers just forget to close the connection, and this sucks the resources of the operating system. And in C#, as you can see, we have this statement actually, which is using var connection factory create connection. Now we are creating the connection from the factory. This design pattern is a factory design pattern. We create the connection, and if we stop using this connection, it will be closed automatically. We don't need explicitly to say connection close. Do you understand that?
Yeah, as soon as you get
Out of the scope.
curly brackets on using,
Exactly.
you're closing this connection.
Exactly.
You have to say
So,
connection dot
yeah.
close.
And inside we have another using statement. I barely can hear you, by the way. Now we open a channel. This is in terms of the message queue, Rabbit message queue. We are not gonna go very deep into this rabbit hole. By coincidence, actually, we're working with Rabbit and we are talking about the rabbit holes. Always rabbit holes. You remember in from Alice in the Wonderland. So if you want to learn something, we usually say we go deep into this rabbit hole, but we don't need to go so deep into any of the rabbit holes as far as we get our job done. That's it. You don't have to be an expert in anything. You have to be an expert in putting everything together. That's it. Okay, so that's absolutely clear what we are doing here. That's why we are opening this using statements. Var channel, connection channel. The connection abstracts the socket connection and takes care of protocol version negotiation and authentication, and so for us, and so forth for us. So without this library, actually, if you want to connect to RabbitMQ server, you have to open a socket. Socket is nothing else but the IP address plus port and the protocol. So you say, okay, I'm opening this port on this IP address and I'm talking such and such protocol. This means to open a socket. And you open this connection to the remote server, which is RabbitMQ, and all this is taking care of this factory connection and the channel. Here we connect to RabbitMQ node on the local machine, hence the local host. If we wanted to connect to a node on a different machine, we would simply specify its hostname or IP address here. That's clear, right? Next, we create a channel, which is where most of the API for getting things done resides. Channel, this is in their terms, so they open a channel. To send, we must declare a queue for us to send to. Then we can publish a message to the queue. Now we have to create a queue. So, do you follow me so far? Can you hear the things?
Yeah, I can hear. Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello? Yeah, I barely can hear you, so that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, I follow you.
Okay, so it's not that much following, but it's more like a feedback. So it's a sanity check. Do you do you understand? Checking,
Feedback.
am I
Just to
sane?
connect
Still
things.
sane?
Yeah.
And also, you help me, no doubt about that. I may made a mistake, so you always can help me with that. Okay, so now I'm gonna bring this a little bit back. Mm, okay, the code beautify actually works right now. Now, string message, hello world. Those are all the spells which you have to use when you connect and when you create a queue in the message queue in the server. So we create a queue which is called hello, durable false, which means that when the Rabbit message queue server is stopped, actually, this message queue is going to be destroyed. If it's true, it's going to be persisted on the file system, but we are going to talk about this a little bit later. Exclusive false, auto delete false, arguments, zero arguments. So it's there is nothing to think about. It's a brainless, actually. You just have to use it the way they recommend, and that's it. So message var body encoding UTF-awesome get bytes message. So it's UTF-awesome encoded, UTF-8 encoded. Sorry about that. Encoding. That's why we added here system text, because encoding it's into this namespace system text. So now channel basic publish blah 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 and console write line send message. Let me save it so it's beautified. um I don't know why I'm bringing them back, but it looks a little bit better to me like that, even though the code beautifier shows me how it's supposed to be. Maybe I'm too picky. Anyway, string message, so I'm gonna use this space. Okay, and now when this is done, console write line, press enter to exit, console read line. That's it. Just to keep the process running, we are reading something. Otherwise, the process will exit immediately when all this is done. So this is the sender. Now let's see the receiver. Declaring a queue is idempotent, which means that idempotent means that doesn't matter how many times actually you you say that you want to create the queue. If the queue already exists, no new queue is going to be created or no queue will be replaced. This means to be idempotent. It's enough just once to be created, and after that, every um, every another attempt to create the queue is gonna be just ignored. That's it. If the queue exists. If doesn't exist, the queue again will be created. It will only be created if it doesn't exist already. The message content is a byte array, so you can encode whatever you like there. It's a byte array, okay? When the code above finishes running, the channel and the connection will be disposed. The channel and the connection will be disposed. We already saw that because it's into this scope where we are gonna using. As soon as the channel, as soon as the program actually goes beyond the line 32, the channel will be disposed, and after that, not sure that I put this in the right position. This should be somewhere here. At least this is what I'm thinking, because it has nothing to do with actually or. Am I right? Console namespace send var public main. This bracket is closing this one. Here they missed actually the brackets, or what is that? Okay, please. Okay. The connection will be closed. Actually, I will leave it inside. What do you think, George?
Yeah, it might work.
So the connection is not gonna be closed until I hit enter. This is what's gonna happen if I put these two statements here.
Why you don't put them inside the block so when you hit enter then
Yeah, I
close?
want to keep this block open, so the connection will remain open until I hit enter. That's why. It's a matter when the connection is going to be closed, which is doesn't matter actually, because the message will be pushed to the server anyway. And the question is when the connection is going to be closed. Right now, when I hit enter or any key, to be honest, then the connection will be closed. Otherwise, the connection will be closed and the application just will hang there until I hit something. So this is the difference, and I don't think it matters. Okay, let's go back. Declaring queue is idempotent. Okay, we talk about that. Connection will be disposed. That's for our publisher. Sending doesn't work. If this is your first time using RabbitMQ message queue and you don't see the sent message, when you may be left scratching your head, wondering what could be wrong. Maybe the broker was started without enough free disk space by default, needs at least 50 megabytes free, and it's therefore refusing to accept messages. Click the broker log file to confirm and reduce the limit if necessary to configuration documentation. I'm not going to read that until we face this problem, if we do. Receiving. Okay, how are we going to receive this? So, as for the consumer, it's listening for messages from RabbitMQ. So now we have to create a listener which is listening for the messages. So unlike the publisher, which publishes a single message, we will keep the consumer running continuously to listen for the messages and print them out. So we're not gonna close the channel. We shouldn't be closing the channel and the connection. The code receiver is almost the same, using statements and send. That's it. Okay, so let me copy this, but notice this RabbitMQ client. For the receiver we have RabbitMQ client events, so it's event-driven development. Let's see how that works. Class receive, public main, factory again, and not sure that I particularly like that, but as you can see, they give you the code byte by a little by a little by little. They don't give you the entire thing, so I actually like that. So again, connection, the same thing, factory connection. So far so good. We saw this already on the sending part, on the producer side, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so um using save it. Okay. So two using statements, nested using statements, and after that the same thing. We said that the channel actually is creating the queue is idempotent, which means that right now, to make sure that the channel and the queue exist, actually the queue exists, the listener or the receiver also makes sure that this queue exists. If it exists, it's not gonna happen anything, otherwise it's gonna be created, because the receiver is gonna listen to this queue. Note that we declare the queue here is as well. This is what I said, because we might start the consumer before the publisher, which is absolutely true. We want to make sure that the queue exists before we try to consume messages from it. We are about to tell the server to deliver us a message from the queue, since it will push us messages asynchronously. This is very important. So the server actually is going to push the messages. It's going to inform our application that somebody is sending something. This is extremely, extremely powerful concept. At least this is in my world. For me, it's very important to create such a system which delivers messages, pushes different messages. This is the basic of the event-driven development. We provide a callback. So when the message is pushed, actually when we receive the message from the server, we have a callback which is ready to get this message and do something with it. That's why, that's what event basic consumer received event handler does. So let's see how that is done. Now, so far, we have created the queue if it doesn't exist. Now, the consumer, event basic consumer channel. Okay, we say which is the channel we have to be listening to. And here we go. This is, oh, pay attention to that, consumer received. And we are adding here event listener, which is what? It's a lambda. Consumer received message. When you receive the message, do the following. Come on, just format it properly. Okay, so this is the listener, this is the callback. Here we go, the callback. And those are the formal parameters which will be assigned by the caller. Body to array. This is the body of the message which you have received. Message encoding UTF-8, UTF-8, sorry about that. Get string body. Console write line receive message. Are we still together, George?
Yeah, yeah. We're here.
Mm-hmm. And at the end, channel basic consume queue hello, auto acknowledgement true, and consumer. We are gonna discuss this into the next tutorials, which we are gonna make today more tutorials. And after that we have console write line, and we are not gonna exit the application.
Are we not risking? I mean, if we use that application in real world and
I
delete
can hear
this code.
very very bad
Whoa.
actually.
Okay, sorry.
Now it's better. When we
Okay.
started the conversation, actually
a-
it was
Are
perfect.
we not risking that we have to delete every message after it gets received? Is that true?
Depends on what do you want. Actually, when you somebody receive the message, there are different strategies in RabbitMQ. We are not gonna go that deep into this rabbit hole, but right now we are auto acknowledge, which means that yeah, we are gonna delete the message when it's received, but we are not gonna get acknowledged from the receiver that he received the message, because imagine what happens. The server pushes the message to the receiver crashes for some reason, or doesn't receive the message, And in this case, in this hello world example, the message will be removed from the queue. Is that answer the question?
Yes, yes, it answered.
Yeah, because the auto acknowledge is set to true, which means that I will acknowledge that I received any message, doesn't matter I haven't received it. This is what it does. But we don't have to go that far into this rabbit hole. The most important thing is just to get the grasp the concept. Those are the most important thing. Okay, so here is the whole receive class. Okay, putting it all together. Now we have to run the receiver. It's gonna create a channel. After that, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay, now that's why I have here. Um, that's why I have here. Trash. This is Rabbit. Hello world. I have many PowerShells open. So now what we have to do is go to the receiver and after that to the sender. Let's go to the receiver, RabbitMQ, hello world, trash. Okay, so we just have to say .NET run. And it's gonna run and wait for messages to receive. Okay, press enter to exit. Now the communication has been established, the queue has been created, the channel has been opened, and now it's listening for messages from our sender. So in another prompt, I'm gonna go to, and I'm gonna keep them both next to each other so we can see when we send something how it's gonna be received by our receiver. Now I'm gonna go to our sender. Oops, sorry about that. Trash rabbit sender, and I'm gonna say dot. Let me clear the screen. Uh, okay, let me clear. Here I didn't clear, but we'll see it now. So now I'm gonna say dot .NET run. Okay, and here we go. Do you see it?
Yeah, it's working.
Yeah, it's working. Perfect. So let me read that to the end, and after that we will stop this video and start another one, which is gonna explain something else. So the consumer will print the message it gets from the publisher via a Rabbit message queue. The consumer will keep running, waiting for messages. Use Control C to stop it. So try running the publisher from another terminal. Yeah, I did it from another terminal, and we saw that it works actually. So I can stop it. I can run it again, and we should be receiving another hello world. Okay, so as you can see, everything works perfect. It's a very simple concept. So this is how the applications actually should be communicating using the advanced message queue protocol. I'm speaking about our services. So time to move to part 2 and build a simple work queue. Work queue is going to allow us actually to assign different pieces of work to different machines. Rabbit message queue is not only for, as you can guess, it's not only for microservice architecture. It's built for many different things. Only the sky is the limit for the our imagination. We can use Rabbit message queue in many different ways, not only for application, not only for this application, but for any kind of applications. It's a very powerful concept. At least I find it a very powerful. Production non-suitable for disclaimer. Okay, not suitable disclaimer. Please keep in mind that this and other tutorial are, well, just tutorials. Yeah, this is what I love. This is the kind of tutorials I love. After that, I'm gonna add complexity. They demonstrate one new concept at a time, and many intentionally oversimplifies some things and leave out others. Listen, I'm using oversimplified tutorials actually to build my applications, and they work. And the complexity comes later. If I overwhelm you with the complexity, then you won't be able to do something. You will be scared by the concept. For example, topics such as connection management, error handling, connection recovery, concurrency, and metric collection are largely omitted for the sake of brevity. Yeah, I don't care right now about the error handling, connection recovery, and concurrency and metric blah blah. Such simplified code should not be considered production ready, blah blah, documentation, read the documentation. So this is gonna conclude our tutorial right now about the RabbitMQ. We got the idea what RabbitMQ is. It's a message broker which receives the messages and after that sends the messages. It's a pretty simple but extremely powerful idea. Gonna stop right now recording and we'll meet in few seconds in our second tutorial.